There are some people who just don't get it. They don't get why you have multiple passions, multiple hobbies, why you have so many goals that you're striving to achieve. And when you try and explain yourself to these people, it ends up making you feel like you're doing life wrong. There's something wrong with the fact that you can't just pick one thing, pursue it, and stick with it for the rest of your life. But there's nothing wrong with having the ability or desire for more. And in fact, the capacity to hold more, that is what adds color to this world. Those are your trendsetters, the people who are stretching the limits, the people who are pushing past barriers. Those are the people who create more space for the rest of us to exist. So today we're diving into how to balance those passions and not let the noise of other people distract you, right? So whether you identify as neurodivergent or multi-passionate, someone whose brain is constantly thinking, someone who just wants to do more in life, experience more, this video is for you. Also, as a disclaimer, because I do really appreciate your compliments and I do love the way that you guys pour into me, I also want to remind you that I am only human, that I too have experienced so many things in life that threatened to dim my light and stop me from pursuing my own passions. I never want you to look at me at where I am in my life and think that you're behind or you're lost or you're doing it wrong because of where I currently am, because I've had more time potentially than you have, or my path is just different. So these videos are never for comparison. They're just to add to what you already know to be true in your own life. So the first step is to reframe the idea of being lost, right? Sometimes when we have multiple passions or things that we're trying to pursue in life, especially if you fall under that category of identifying yourself as different or neurodivergent or just someone who has multiple passions, we can feel a little lost, right? Sometimes when you're in your 20s, that's language that we often hear more often than not, that someone is lost or trying to find themselves. But when you get into your 30s, it really doesn't change. You're still figuring things out, understanding yourself. And I think at every stage of life, as long as you're engaging with your inner core, you're trying to decipher who you are, you're going to feel like you're rediscovering sides of yourself. So instead of saying that we're lost, we want to change the way that we engage with that phase of our life and just say we're discovering something new about ourselves, or we're expanding our awareness of who we are. When you identify yourself as learning, discovering, rediscovering, recovering, it's a more freeing state than to say that you're lost. Because if you really sat with yourself, you're not lost. You're just trying to balance all of these different pieces, especially if I'm talking about specifically in your 20s, when you just come out of high school, you might have just graduated college, you could have had a baby, you could have started a new career, you could just be trying to settle in. And again, the first half of my 20s, I did differently than the latter half of my 20s. And the same with my 30s. So your early part of any decade is figuring out what this new chapter of your life means, what this new season of your life is bringing, and what you want to discover about yourself. And you might add on new passions or new hobbies or things that you want to pursue. And instead of feeling uncomfortable or awkward or distracted by the fact that you once again have something new that you want to dive into, you want to see it as adding another tool to your kit, to your life that adds more color. It allows you to blossom more into who you are meant to be or who you desire to be. Sometimes the passions and how many hobbies and interests we have isn't necessarily the problem. It's the structure or the lack of structure. Especially if you're neurodivergent, you might be someone who struggles with systems and implementing them. And you look at other people and you just think, how are you doing that? And I know for myself, one of the biggest things was when I started to implement new systems in place, I learned them from my husband. And not because I was like, hey, teach me your ways. I just saw that he seemed to navigate certain spaces with ease in a way that I couldn't. And instead of beating myself up and feeling like I just wasn't a morning person or I wasn't someone who could be as organized, I started to pick up on what he was doing and implement those things. So for you, it could just be that you lack the structure that's necessary for your passions and dreams and goals to funnel through. And as someone who has had many passions in life, from bodybuilding to gardening to cooking to even motherhood, scrapbooking, I know what it feels like to try and balance all of these things and make time for them and not feel guilty that you pick up a passion or a hobby and then you drop it. So the game plan that we would use to structure our passions is going to start with our core values. Because who you are as a person, or who you align with, who you desire to be, the things that you want to be surrounding yourself with, things that you want to be doing with your time, you want them to align with that version of yourself. So for example, if you are someone who has a real desire to have a major impact on people's lives, you might be interested in volunteering a lot more than someone else would. But because of social media, especially, we can see what other people are doing with their lives, and we can get distracted by what other people are doing and feel like you're not doing enough, or you should be doing more of one particular thing, and it's not even something you're interested in, or it doesn't align with your core values or who you desire to be. The next step is scheduling things out. One of the things that really helps me so much is that I have set reminders for things that I want to be doing, or things that I need to remember. And then I rotate out my hobbies, especially because I do have kids, I'm busy, I'm married, I have a farm, I have a lot of things going on, but I have things that really are important to me. And so I make time for them via a schedule. And when you're trying to balance the things you need to do versus the things you desire to do, you want to make sure that you are intentional about doing that. And if you're a mom like me, then you really need to prioritize yourself, self-care, self-love, to be centered and grounded, because there's so many changes that your body goes through hormonally, emotionally, mentally, physically, that if you don't make time for yourself without guilt, you will literally destroy who you are as a person. You will just be a diaper bag. I'm not even being dramatic. I'm being so for real. You do not want to be someone who doesn't remember who she even is. Now, there is phases, okay, where you're going to be fully dedicated to your baby and your child and their life, obviously. Never think that that's forever, that you are rolling around in sweatpants and can't really take time for yourself. That doesn't last forever. But I also know that when you never switch out of that mode, when you never switch into, okay, now who am I and who do I want to be, you can lose yourself. And that's difficult too. This can also happen even when you're younger and you don't have kids. If you're in college where you're focused on trying to make it in life, you're trying to get a job or you're trying to survive, where you can just forget who you are, who you wanted to be, what passions that made you happy. Also, if you were in a toxic relationship and you lost yourself and you're lost touch with the things that you loved, this is also going to happen as well. So making time for the things that remind you of who you are for whatever reason that you've lost touch is important. Which brings me to my next point, which is that there is a time and a season for everything. So when you're in different chapters, phases, seasons of your life, certain things are going to be more important than others. So if you have a passion project and you just haven't gone back to it and you feel guilty about it, but you've been really busy at work, or you again just had a baby, you want to mentally restructure the way that you engage with that. Don't say to yourself, I can't believe how long it's been since I picked up X, Y, and Z or did X, Y, and Z. There's a time for everything. And sometimes when you're more focused on certain aspects of your life, other things are not going to be as important. This is also why the idea of having 3 things in a day that you really want to achieve is very important, because it puts less pressure on ourselves to get everything done all at once, all the time, especially if you're coming out of perfectionism mode. If you are neurodivergent and you are a masker and you had to fit in and do what other people are doing, and now you're trying to stretch outside of that space, it's important to give yourself the room to be as different as you are or desire to be. The next step is Pareto's law, or Pareto's principle. And it's the idea of 80-20, where 80% of your output comes from 20% of your input. And this basically work smarter, not harder. This is to help us avoid burnout, to help us really stay in alignment with the things that we desire to be doing. And when you're trying to survive, or you work a 9 to 5, or the things that you are trying to give yourself to, it's not necessarily panning out in the way that you expected, especially if your passions are one that you're trying to like monetize or sell. This is really important. It reminds me of this quote where they said it's the quiet hustle that has the most impact. Your whole life shouldn't just be the things you have to get done, the survival, the moving forward constantly in order to check social boxes. Your passions can be things that don't necessarily go anywhere in terms of what society deems as success. But if they feed your soul, it's important. And a lot of times, there are so many people who have lost touch with their inner child, or that childlike, fun, curious nature within themselves, and they don't know how to get back to it. When we're only focusing on getting work done or moving forward, we can forget to give ourselves a break, to do things that are just fun for no reason. This is why they also say, like, detach from social media and not everything has to be posted, because we do live in a time where that validation is a dopamine hit. So it's distracting, basically. You don't have to change your whole life overnight. You just need to change the way you structure it, the way that you mentally engage with it, the stories that you tell yourself about it, and the emotions that are evoked when you think about it. You know exactly the person that you're meant to be, the person you desire to be. You have the vision boards, you have the ideas, but sometimes we feel uncomfortable with letting out that fullness of ourselves. This is truly for my quirky, out there, different kind of women who don't necessarily feel like the things that they desire, or the passions or hobbies, or all of the multiple interests that they have, that they fit a stereotypical norm. And they're trying to figure out how to balance it. They're trying to figure out how to make sense of it, or how to be okay with that part of yourself. But you don't have to, because you already know who you are. You already know what you want to do. You just need to out loud say that you like yourself and go for the things that you want to, and unapologetically own it. And even if it's messy, even if it's unclear and you're unsure, don't call it lost. Don't say that you don't know who you are, you don't know what you're doing. Allow yourself to just show up and let it unfold. You have your plan, you structure things out, but you don't get so rigid that you seek or chase perfectionism. Your path is going to look different from potentially every person around you, and that's okay. Again, people like this add color to this life. They're so much fun. They make life feel enjoyable just because they exist. I truly love women like this. I love how different they are, how quirky they are, their style of dress, the way they put themselves together, the way they talk, what they get excited about. And when you're too afraid to be that version of yourself, you not only rob yourself of the enjoyment of being that person, but you also rob us of the gift of seeing you as that full potential. This is where trusting ourselves and trusting our specific path comes in, and why it's so important to remember that version of yourself and who you are meant to be. And I do have a video on self-trust that I just dropped, so if you want to check that one out. Also, don't forget that I have the Bold Woman's Self-Trust playlist, or playbook, sorry, that is in the description, and that is completely free. And I'll see you in the next one.